This hour, we're going to be talking about the ANC. Obviously, we are going into an election next year, and the ANC would gladly like you to vote for it again. I wonder whether you have an appetite to do so, given everything that we know that has happened in society and in the state over the last couple of years. Well, the one person who's tasked with persuading you to do so from an organization point of view is, of course, Fikile Mbalula, who's the ANC's election head. And we are grateful that he's taken time off, not just from the Tuli House, but also Twitter, to spend the next hour with us. Thank you so much for coming to studio.
No, thank you for having me, and to all your listeners.
You are now officially a 702 Black.
No, I'm a very, very important Black in the building of 702 this morning.
We appreciate your being there. So thanks so much for coming in.
Yes.
Listen, let's get straight into it, right? I asked my producers and I had a look at the data. You know the data as well as I do. Since 1994, you guys did extremely well. I mean, 2004 in particular, 69%. But it's been a steady decline in terms of the ANC's electoral fortunes. In fact, in 2009, Fikile, the results nationally, as you know, in terms of the aggregate data, would have been horrific for the ANC, even more than the final numbers looked, if it wasn't for that amazing upswing in KZN, where you went from 46.98% in 2004 to 62.95% in 2009. But every other province in 2009, there was a decline over 2004. And then in the latest national elections in 2014, it was only in the Northern Cape and in the Eastern Cape where there was a marginal improvement in the graph sloping upwards. In all the other 7 provinces, there was a decline. What, in your opinion, is the story of this slow electoral decline over time?
Well, there are varied reasons for that decline, but in 1994, when Mandela came into power, we did below 60. I mean, not below 60, we're at 62%.
That's right, yeah. Where
we were in 2014. And with Mbeki coming in, and when people were saying that they will fill up Madiba's shoes, 1999, we saw a boom. And then we doubled with a 2/3 majority. And then thereafter, there was a slow decline up to 2004 and now. And there are varied reasons in terms of that decline. It can still go up or go worse. And we have entertained those. It depends on your own strategy, depend on your campaign, it depends on the challenges and how you responded to those challenges at that given point in time.
But why was there a decline? Particularly, like I'm saying, if we were to go into, for example, 2009 and we took KZN out of the picture, the results actually look horrible. In fact, even though you've been consistently above 60%, if we imagine the country at 8 provinces and KZN wasn't part of it, you in fact would have been dipping beneath that psychological threshold of 60%. So there's obviously a problem here. And I wonder, when you are speaking behind closed doors, what your diagnosis is for why those numbers are downward sloping over time in terms of the trend.
The worst of them all, the last election, it's informed by a big challenge of how we conducted ourselves in relation to nomination of public representatives. And we generated a lot of independence moving out of the ANC. And we equally, over and above that, had a number of things that cropped up in different provinces, Gauteng in particular, e-tolls, and then the persistent attack on the head of the African National Congress, which that message, went with what you may call, the black professionals, what other people call clever blacks, and so on. And it caused damage there. But over and above that, our own intra-party squabbles and also undermining of democratic processes in the organization of election of public representatives. You talk about Port Elizabeth, you talk about Tshwane, where there, when people were protesting, no Sputla, no vote, did not come from the opposition. We aided the opposition. But the other decline is because there was a split in the party. If you talk about 2009, I was in that campaign. We fought a very difficult campaign, and COPE came into being, and no minos went to COPE, big leaders. Remember, within the short space that those guys formed COPE, they managed to register about 1 million voters in the system. And where did those voters come from? From the ANC. And that saw us standing at 65%.
Okay, so I'm listening to you, and all of these factors strike me as contributing factors, but you've basically outlined it in about 3 minutes or so. And it seems to me that the most obvious dominant part of the explanation is one that you've left out: corruption. Rampant corruption within the state is what the voters are telling you with this declining fortunes it is fed up with. How big a part of the explanation for the downward trend over time? I mean, above 60% is still impressive anywhere in the world, but the trend is downward sloping. Isn't the most important part of the explanation that corruption in the state has run rampant and you haven't got it under control, and your decline, even though it is still above 60%, is a reflection of the country being fed up?
It is incorrect entirely to say the state and the ANC doesn't do anything about corruption. If you look at our strategies in terms of organized crime and how we have responded to the question of organized, criminal syndicates that promote corruption, and corruption even within the public service, what has affected the ANC and its integrity is the implication of its public representatives, among others. Yes, correctly so, where in which there are perceptions that we've got a laissez-faire approach when it comes to individuals who are involved in corrupt activities in the organization. But it is not entirely correct that corruption resonates with the African National Congress. Yes, there is a narrative that has been built out of there. But over and above that corruption that is there in the public service and everywhere else, we have put measures in place to respond to that. In South Africa, for instance, anybody could do as they wish prior 94 and years later. You cannot at the present moment, if you are not tied to a bank. And we've got the National Intelligence Center that looks into that. Money laundering, as much as people can do that, but it catch up with them. Otherwise, it is dirty money because of the systems we have put in place.
Okay,
if you look all of those things did not simply spring up. They happened because there was a focus on fighting organized corruption within the private sector and the public.
Okay, so we need to separate out two things. One is to get a grip on the nature and the scope of the problem that might explain the ANC's electoral results. And then the second is what is the ANC-led government in the state actually doing about it? I'm going to come back to the second one and give you ample opportunity to explain to the public. But on the first, surely we don't have to mince our words here, particularly if you want the ANC to be given another chance after this new dawn after Nasrec. Isn't the simple, basic truth in plain speaking English that rampant corruption is a key part of why opposition parties suddenly become an attractive option for so many voters? You have not got the corruption problem under control.
No, opposition parties, in terms of why they get support, and you also need to analyze that particular support. As much as the ANC, you see the declining fortunes, is the opposition rising? That is the fundamental question you've got. And I will say that it is a shrinking pond in the sense that they are fishing from the same. And if you analyze correctly, 2 elections back to back, 2014 and the last election, where the ANC would have lost, including the metros, the opposition to a certain extent have actually stayed with the same numbers, which in any result will not even give them a coalition government. Now, in this particular instance, I'm saying that there is a rampant corruption that you talk about, but in this particular instance, it's a question that the ANC itself deals with in relation to when corruption affects the ANC through its own members who are implicated. Now,
would you agree with me with the following two claims?
Okay.
That corruption is systemic in society, including in the state and the private sector, but it is systemic in society, and that the ANC has been woefully poor in rooting out corruption.
Let's look at the state organs and ANC members. Tell me of one ANC member who have actually been made a favor.
Tell me of one person who's gone to jail because of state capture.
No, let me say this. Tell me of one person in the ANC who have been implicated in activities of corruption, has been made a favor to be exonerated by state organs. The ANC have been always consistent. Where you are implicated, let the law take its course. And members of the ANC, right? Some of them who have been seconded in state organs have tasted time and have gone to jail for what they've been implicated in and have paid time around that. You talk about the commissioner of police in this country, who happened to be a member of the ANC after some time and seconded there, was implicated, charged and trialed and sent to jail. State capture, the ANC have embraced what society and the public protector has. We've got checks and balances. We are not a law unto ourselves. It means that the state organs must do their job. The Chapter 9 institutions, Public Protector Thulima Donsela, arrived at the conclusions that she has arrived at. We have embraced that there is a Judicial Commission of Inquiry on state capture. Now, the arrest of people in terms of state capture depend not only on that process, equally on the efficiency and efficacy of the state organs to do their job without fear or favor.
But I was coming to that next, because you claim that the ANC is doing something about corruption, but you know better than me, because you were the political head responsible for law enforcement. You know better than me that key parts of the state that are entrusted as a matter of law to do the law enforcement, whether we're talking economic crimes or other categories of crimes, that there's a leadership crisis within the SEPs, within specialized parts of the criminal investigative and criminal justice system, and that as a result of that is the key reason why the years and years of incredible hollowing out of the state that we have seen, that led to the kind of revelations we've seen in the last 18 months or so in terms of the Gupta email leaks. There is a reason why we have not seen anyone behind bars in light of what the public now knows, and that is because of a profound leadership crisis within the criminal justice system.
I will say yes and no. There was ineptness in terms of perception. We intervened, we acted. You must remember that, take about the Hawks. Spend a lot of years, Hawks, lack of stability, the head of Hawks being implicated, getting in and out of court. It took us less than a week to deal with that matter. We put him aside. At the present moment, all the structures and the systems within the police enable them to execute their task without fear or favor. And Peggy Cele, I think, is doing a marvelous job in regrouping and building on what we have started in terms of stability, dealing with ineptness, and fighting corruption. That's why...
Before we take a break, Fikile, then we'll take some calls as well. I don't want to hog the mic here. The public also wants to engage on elections. And remember, we've invited him specifically to talk elections. But just as we go into a break, just give me a number there to help me out. You know, us journalists are lazy. How many people have been arrested for state capture?
I cannot account for that, because the law enforcement agencies are dealing with the matter and they are processing all issues related to that. And equally, the Judicial Commission.
Isn't the real answer Dololo arrests?
No, it's easy for you to say Dololo arrest. State capture was uncovered last year. And then even by the time when these allegations were made, I can tell you from where I am already, there was execution plan on the part of the police to deal with those.
Execution? Now, I hope it's prosecution. Eh?
No, execution will lead to prosecution. Arresting people is not like fetching people out of a bar and arrest them at random. It is a process, meticulous, but it will come to the result. And I know for a fact that the state organs assist with these matters.
But you guys are going through a honeymoon at the same time. It must be a relief after Nasrec to have a little bit of Ramaphoria, and also, as Professor Samadora says of the DA, I think it now also applies to the EFF. They're busy mutilating themselves in the corner unprovoked. So it's a good time for you. You probably wish elections was tomorrow rather than next year.
No, it's not a given. We are on the path of winning the trust of the people. It's still difficult out there about how we are viewed. And only complacent and arrogant people can simply come to a conclusion that opposition is hamophoraging and therefore we are in a honeymoon and that is it. It is not.
Sure.
That is why we are on the ground and correcting things. And our own approach to Tumamena as a clarion call to the nation, that is why it is focused on fixing things for the people. And basically saying that let us not only be obsessed about our internal issues, let's deal with the questions that besiege communities and our people in general.
And a lot of them want to ask you, but I just want to sneak in this question before I come to you, Richard. Given everything that's happened in society, in the state, given the state of the economy, inequality, unemployment, low levels of economic growth, all the things we know about the Gupta influence on the state, unfortunately, given all of that, what did you settle for next year?
In terms of the percentage, we settle for decisive victory, overwhelming majority, and we don't want to quantify that into a percentage.
But it will take a miracle to get over 60% again, eh?
Well, if that did be, it will be reflected by how our people feel about us and the things we seek to do to win back their trust. So we're going for decisive victory, and we're working hard towards that, and the question is with the voter.
Richard, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi there, Richard. What is your question or your comment?
All right. So, greetings to your guest. My concern is that you, Eusebius, and your predecessors have been asking these questions for years. And then you are asked back again, okay, so, who was put in jail? Let's go back a bit. The Strategic Oil Fund was stripped of billions by short-selling the National Oil Fund, okay? A report on the 1st of July was put out through News 24 that said a series of reports by Treasury shows that the IDT, the South African National Road Agency, Kucha Development Corporation, etc., are unable to account for 1.6 billion rand that's disappeared, which was meant for mobile classrooms, roads, and social housing in the province. That's just one area. Now, there is so much evidence that people are exhausted. And the clever question is always, okay, name one person found guilty who didn't go to jail or something. I mean, it's unbelievable. We're dying in an avalanche of crime. There's no money. And somehow the ANC is not responsible. That's really not credible.
So do you have a question, or are you simply saying you don't find him compelling?
I don't find it compelling, but my question is, how is the ANC dealing with places like the Eastern Cape, and why didn't they publish a list, if this is what they base their credibility on all the people that are going to jail? Because we don't know where to find that list. Okay,
good. Thank you, Richard. Lele in Protea Glen, welcome.
Hey, Yubi. I'd like to ask Fikile, why did they appoint Tony Yangeni as the head of corruption, yet he was charged for corruption? And, because I see that Jessie Duarte was also trying to redeem Yangeni. So I'll listen on the radio.
On the proverbial radio. Okay, we'll get him to answer in a second. Mark, how's it?
Hi, Eusebius. Thanks for Mr. Mbalula for taking his busy schedule from Dubai to come into the studio. He says ultimately that the ANC is fighting corruption. Kini Makwetu, only a couple of weeks ago, once again issued a scathing report on service delivery in the municipalities, where instead of improving, and all these qualified reports, instead of improving every year, they seem to be going down. We're losing between 50 and 60 billion every year out of municipalities, and the only And over 70% of the clean orders come from the Western Cape, where the ANC is governing. Now, how does he explain that? Where all the provinces where the ANC are actually governing and supposed to supply basic service delivery, okay?
Yeah, okay, we've got the questions. They're all clear. Richard has a very specific example about Kucha, but we can set it aside and deal with the Eastern Cape as a province, very important province for all sorts of historic reasons for the ANC, a home province for many of us who come to places like Joburg to find our fortune. And you've lost a place like Nelson Mandela Bay, which obviously psychically, from a political psychology point of view, was huge for the African National Congress. How are you going to win back the trust of people in the Eastern Cape?
Well, Nelson Mandela Bay, when we lost it, we were on a big drive in terms of turnaround and attracting investment and bringing about that investment to create more jobs. Well, you can go back there and see what the DA does there, whether or not they could build on what we did. There is total stagnation in that part of the area. It
started before they took over. That's why you lost it.
Yeah, no, we lost it because largely on the account of our own people not coming out to vote. Remember, in this loss again, people stayed away. They didn't go and vote for the DA. And the DA support base is loyal. They vote. So our people didn't go and vote because they were disgruntled.
It had nothing to do with poor governance from everywhere, from Buffalo City to PE.
It had everything to know we won Buffalo City. Port Elizabeth.
I know, but I'm talking about the state of the Eastern Cape. Are you telling me that governance should not figure in a description of why you didn't do well?
No, governance, among others, was part of the challenges that we face.
The most important, right?
Yes, and I say to you, at the point when we were voted out, we're on a big drive of turnaround through Denny Jordan. Go back to that. If we have time, we can analyze deeper. And to this point, there's been a growing skewed disparity in relation to delivery issues in that part. And that's why DA is facing a burnout party in that part of the province. I'm saying that...
no, but hold on. Just I want to come back to the governance point. Do you agree with me that the Eastern Cape is run in a piss-poor manner and that is the most important reason why you are struggling in the Eastern Cape to do as well as you historically do there?
What we're doing at the present moment is that all the difficulties and the challenges we're faced with, we're saying it is our time to fix them. And that goes even for the Eastern Cape or any other part of the province where we're governing. And we're very much committed to ensuring that we turn the situation around.
Okay, the remarks about Tony Yengeni obviously were reported in the Sunday Times from Jessie Duarte saying basically the courts made a mistake and quite frankly a lot of people don't declare discounts that they might get. What do you make of that? Do you agree with Jessie's remarks?
Listen, the difficulty of debating the merits of the outcome of Tony Yengeni case, you are likely to be misconstrued to be defending corruption. And I think Comrade Jessie has been misunderstood. We're not saying that what Tony went through and what ultimately became a judgment of fraud against him is something that we uphold. And all what she was doing was to debate the merits, that the matter belonged to the legislature, was supposed to be resolved there, not in the courts, by way of either declaring and dealing with the matter in that particular context. Whether or not the car was a discount or not a discount, unfortunately the courts had a different judgment to that. And Comrade Tony served his time in jail, and he's actually come back and is allowed to participate in the structures as elected. And he's not chairing a corruption committee. He's chairing peace and stability, given his expertise in the area of peace and stability, given his background in the organization over the years in Umkhonto weSizwe.
Jessie said that he was wrongfully convicted. He did nothing wrong. Do you agree with him?
The question I said, Eusebius, to debate the merits of that case, you are likely to be misconstrued to defending corruption. And I don't want to get into that. The case came, and then Comrade Tony served his time, and that is it. So
now we know the facts.
I can debate. I can debate that, but I have to remove the ANC from me and my understanding of that case.
That's
because
okay.
I was involved in it. I know, because I accompanied Comrade Tony to go there as the Youth League and so on, and I know what actually happened. And I'm not ready to debate.
We live in a democracy, right? So you're allowed to engage even a judgment of the court.
Yes.
The thing is, even if you try and kick for touch, that is also a risky strategy, because the public will hear you being at best ambiguous in a time when corruption is a problem.
I'm not ambiguous.
So if you are not ambiguous, can you tell us unambiguously whether you agree with Jessie?
No, that is like straight-jacketing my answer. And I'm not being ambiguous. And I'm saying to you, the ANC position have accepted the outcome of the court in relation to the matter. Debating the merits of the case is a matter that can make you as an individual to be misconstrued, to be promoting corruption. We are not there. The case came and it is gone. Where we are now at the present moment is that Comrade Tony is a member of the NEC of the ANC and is chairing peace and stability given his political background and his expertise on that particular area, which has got absolutely nothing to do with that particular case in relation to where we stand as an organization.
Can I ask you this, and then we go into Mark's question about municipalities next and the AG's report?
Yeah.
Would you agree with my opinion, just as a citizen, that the remarks from Jessie Duarte were absolutely shocking? And if I was allowed to use a swear word without going to the BCCSA, I would, because her remarks is the kind of remarks that make people think, you know what, everyone in the ANC doesn't take seriously a conviction of fraud, and it's a serious economic crime. I think her remarks were shocking beyond belief. Would you agree with that kind of characterization on my part?
You are entitled to that characterization, but equally allow Comrade Jessie to come to you and express a view in relation to what she meant. Let us not live in an era in which we will ultimately as a nation suffer from inertia. If she feels strong and she wants to explain the background to the facts that she put across, let the platform be open for her to explain what she meant about it.
So the ANC is not dismayed by her remarks?
The ANC, in relation to the organization, understands where it stands in relation to that case,
which is
the conviction. No,
that the court got it right.
No, the matter went to court, and then the court arrived at the decision.
Does the ANC accept the authority of the court?
And the ANC have always upheld the rule of law.
But Jessie said the court got it wrong.
Jessie,
who is she speaking for? She's speaking for the ANC?
Jessie is not speaking for the African National Congress. She was expressing a view in relation to the discourse on the Tony Ngeni issue is concerned. Remember, the discourse was saying that this and that had actually happened with the case, and she was saying, by the way, let's go back.
That's not what she said.
Let's play back.
Michaela, do you know what would be useful? Is if I actually quote her words for her, so we don't.
You can quote her words, but the fact of the matter.
Hold on, let me quote it, and then we can discuss something that's actually factually accurate.
Let's do that.
Here's what she said. Now tell me this doesn't bother you as a South African. This is, quote, "The conviction of Comrade Tony Ngeni worries many in the ANC. What are we saying? If you negotiate a vehicle in this country, you dare not negotiate a discount because that's corruption?" End of quote. I mean, please. That is shocking. Unambiguously shocking.
Look, she's debating the merits of the case in relation to what happened, but the courts arrived at a different decision. Okay? And that decision was that Comrade Tony was found guilty. And the ANC look at its statement at that moment when that happened. And the ANC is very clear. Now, if as Mbalula, I want to argue the merits of the case and the question of fairness or unfairness, it's my own view.
Okay, let's move on.
It's my own view.
Obviously, in terms of the spheres of government, local government matters enormously because that's at the coalface of delivery, as we typically say about municipalities. Mark drew our attention to how the results from within the state itself, like the AG's reports, give us a sense of incredible levels of not just corruption, but also skills deficits across the country in many, many of our municipalities. What do you say to him? Because I think he's challenging you there as the ANC elections head. There isn't a good story to tell going into the elections campaign about the state of municipalities nationally.
Of course, there is no good story to tell there, given the AG's report. The minister is on record addressing those issues as we speak at the present moment, and to turn around the situation in the municipalities and to address the challenges that have come out of the Aegis report. So we're not folding our arms in that regard, as the ANC would like to see perfection. And that is why in our Tumamina Trail campaign, we focus on that, fixing issues that have been identified and ensuring that we hold public representatives, including our own, accountable. And that is what is important for us.
Okay, let's take a couple.
And to this extent, we have even acted in areas like Metsimaholo in Putadichaba, where we had a mayoral issue and so on. Vus Chabalala, we put him aside. And we brought in administration to address the challenges that we face. So we're not folding our arms and claiming easy victories and lying over the challenges. We're attending to them.
A lot of my listeners want to ask you questions. I've been putting you under pressure with some accountability questions. I want to give you some breathing space and ask you this open-ended question, right? So you have to craft a story that you can take from one platform to the next, from community to community, crisscross the country over the next less than a year. What are you going to tell, and what do you want to begin to tell in terms of a positive story that will make the average Joe that's listening to you and I right now have faith that voting for the ANC next year is not a case of doing something that goes against your self-interest as a voter? What is that story going to look like as you begin to crisscross the country?
Well, my story will be first to understand what a voter is concerned about and what a voter wants out of the ANC manifesto, and what a voter wants the ANC to address expeditiously. And the ANC will then have to sit down and respond to that voter, but equally build on what the ANC will have achieved. But the ANC will be an ANC that always listens. And that says that these are the issues that face our people and we need to respond promptly to them. But over and above that, this is what the people want out of us. Otherwise, I can close the door, become bookish, and sit on a desktop and write the manifesto. That's not my approach. My approach is a people's manifesto. And that is the approach of people saying to us what is it that they want if they believe in the ANC. If they don't believe in us, after all, they've got no contribution to make. They can do it to others. But I would like to persuade them to basically come our direction, and we shape up what is good out of what we have come across at the present moment.
And that's a hard challenge for you, isn't it, after the Zuma years?
Everything is a challenge.
Particularly after the Zuma years.
No, it has been a challenge since Mandela years. When Mbeki came in 1999 and we registered overwhelming majority, it has been even harder with the emergence of COPE. And we got 65% and 1 million left with Mbazi Mashiloa. And then it's even been harder with the coming in of the Reds in the midst of all this. Yes, it has been harder, even out of the challenges of the state capture that has been pumped in our direction. We need to respond to all of those. So it's not going to be an easy ride for us, and at the same time, a declared victory in advance. It's going to be hard work.
You don't need my advice. I'm just a pundit and a broadcaster. I suspect what might help you a little bit, if I was a Lutuli House junior official working with you, is to say to the country, forgive us, we are sorry. We should have done more to be on our guard and to make sure that we had got rid of the people that Jacob Zuma was in cahoots with, who was stealing from you and I as keys. Please forgive us. Would you like to take the opportunity to say so?
In our January 8 statement, when the president ascended to the platform in East London, he did exactly that. In all the platforms where our president has been speaking, in funerals of veterans, message? He said that in other areas we could have done better. We didn't. And for that, we are sorry. He did that on many occasions whenever he found platform to address issues. What other modesty will we ask for? Our own president, our own January 8 statement speaks to the heart of respecting the people of South Africa. And the fact that we could have acted promptly in certain things, but it doesn't mean that we cannot act at the present moment.
It's a very good start to say I could have done better. There's many areas of my life where I could have done better. I'm sure my exes would say so. But there's a difference between saying I could have done better and saying I failed you. I'm sorry.
I failed you. I'm sorry. And I'm doing something about it. And that's what we're doing at the present moment. And that is what the New Dawn is all about. The New Dawn is not hollow. The New Dawn captures exactly what is being done at the present moment to, among others, address the issues that were concerns of our people. Otherwise, we could have just said the New Dawn is about a personality, is about an individual, is about a person. Cyril Ramaphosa, Ramaphoria, and all of that. But what do you do in the New Dawn? You've got economic challenges, you've got unemployment, and at the same time, you've got corruption, like you say. How do you respond to those things? And that is what this New Dawn is all about. And our president has been emphatic in capturing the moment of where we're heading to capture the New Dawn to be part of us in a positive way going forward.
Okay, let's take a last round of questions from the public. Linda, good morning to you and welcome to this conversation.
Thank you, Eusebius. What I want to know to the minister is, before the time he was the minister of police, he publicly mentioned that people who killed Senzo Moyiwa, they know who are they, and they are going to be arrested in a week's time. What happened to that? And when he left, he handed over the portfolio to Begitele.
Okay, thank you, Linda. I'll give him a chance to engage you in a second. George, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello, George. What do you want to ask?
Two things. First thing, I want to know what the ANC did about the private sector crimes with regard the funds, with regard the parastatals which get not the parastatals, the private company which gets created to kill parastatal companies.
Okay.
And to drain the fund and the customers from them. Two, I want Fikile to become a Sangoma for a few minutes and get into the brain of Jessie Duarte and find what she meant and what she said and answer for her.
Okay, well, he's already engaged that question, to be fair, but we'll ask him on your question about private sector corruption. I will take a final question for this conversation. Moodley in Lenasia, good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, and what a lovely guest you have. He's got his boxing gloves on there, I see.
No, he just engages passionately, as do I. What question do you have for him? Anything goes.
Yeah, you see, Region G, that's the south of Johannesburg. This was the second home of Mr. Mandela when he was released. You know, we have the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation here. We have the Mahatma Gandhi Foundation here. We have Mahatma Gandhi's farm here. And this area, due to apartheid, was forced removals going back to 1949, 1950. This was already such a stronghold of the ANC. And we all respected and loved Mr. Mandela and the ANC, and everybody voted. Since Mr. Mandela's passing on, we've seen so much of disrespect here. So I don't know. In this area, you got hundreds of thousands of voters who would like to come back and support you and make you grow and make you be what you want to be. I was just reading Mr. Mahatma Gandhi's history going back to 1912.
What is your question for Mr. Mbalula? If you want to make a pact with him, right? You say there's lots of voters there who may want to vote ANC again if they had not done so in the last election. Under what conditions? I feel that there's a condition coming out here.
We have lots of hassles here. You been to Enidale, to El Dorado. We have a drug problem here out of control, number one. We have squatter camps here, like I heard in the news. There's so much of fires and the children. And I'm so saddened by the amount of youth that stand at the traffic lights looking for food. So there's so many issues here, like we have in the rest of the country. So just give us some hope that we can vote and get Mr. Mandela back in our hearts.
Okay, we'll come to your question last, Moodley. Quite a fitting question there about hope as well. I'm not sure hope can fill the tummies. The censor question keeps coming up. A lot of people actually wanted me to ask you that. That was Linda's first question about where those investigations were at.
Look, I don't want to speak about that unless I bungle the police work, which I'm knowledgeable about because I'm really fresh from there. All I can say is that we didn't put time frames, and the person who confused the whole thing is Beriru account on Twitter about that particular case. But we have not put off our foot from the clash since we came in the police on that case. And the Minister of Police currently is equally seized with that matter. It's not as easy as you may think. And we all think and we want that matter to have been resolved because Beriru and others in the social media have made it to be so simple that you can mention names of people and then you think that the police bungled and all of that, and so that is the case. It's always not like that. They simply complicate matters. But the police assist with this, and like they say, the long hand of the law will not give up, till the criminals who killed Senzo are found.
Okay. George had a question about private sector corruption, and that's very important because we often have this very false narrative that it's only people inside the state that have a monopoly on wrongdoing. But it takes two to tango, and it's often a relationship between someone invariably in the private sector and someone in the state. Just give us your reflection there on what you think the state can yet do better, or the ANC-led government, to root it out everywhere, not just in the state, but the private sector as well.
Look, corruption is corruption, wherever it is. In the private sector, look, we talk VBS and all allegations. And we know now the directors of VBS and the people who are associated with VBS, what they owned. They had jets, they had this and that. It's a big talk of the town. And then there's another corruption of Steinhoff. We don't even know what the owners of Steinhoff are actually owning and the billions that they've chowed. So, we've got to attack. And all of these equally depend on state organs, not to pull back and to deal with corruption in all its manifestations, especially in the private sector. I want the people who colluded on 2012 and promoted corruption on the construction companies, all what they got through the Competition Commission is a fine because they've got money. You're asking criminals for something that they have to get out of jail, they do. But the poor who get caught with corruption every day, they don't have money. So I want those people to be brought to book and to sharpen our means of fighting corruption through legislation to ensure that the corruption that is so huge in the private sector is actually dealt a blow.
When those people in the private sector who are corrupt are not brought to book, who does the buck stop with?
The buck stop with the state. It undermines the authority of the state.
And who's in charge of the state currently?
We are not in charge of the state. We are simply occupying levers of the democratic state. We don't direct the state. The state in itself has got ultimate powers to intervene. All what we say to the state is that act without fear or favor and decisive. That's why the state, in terms of its power, can even arrest the head of state, because it is the state. If we were running, we're directing the state what it is supposed to do, it means the rule of law will diminish. Now, all of us as society, we must gather the voices together and say, and of course the ANC must be vocal and ambiguous in terms of these issues. We must call on the courts to be decisive. We must direct from policy interventions where we can to strengthen the criminal justice system.
Okay.
And so when we come across with voices that say, no, we love corruption, or people think what Mbalula says it means is ambiguous, is not understood, then people will say that, you see, and those who are opposed to us will equally do that. And that is why I put the line. The ANC is very clear. I can argue my point, but the question is, there is an ANC line in relation to all of this. So we must be unambiguous and decisive and call on state organs to fight corruption to continue.
Okay, I'm going to park that one because we've run out of time. I just have a last question I wanted to ask you. I saw you tweeting about this last week when I had Panyaza Lesufi on the show, and he was reflecting on his own leadership ambitions here in Gauteng, but also a little bit on the electoral prospects of the ANC doing better in Gauteng next year than he did in 2016. Along the way, he said something quite curious but interesting, that a big part of the explanation for why Gauteng didn't do as well as he would have liked as an ANC leader in this province is because of the entry of EFF into the electoral space. And then he said, of his own accord, after that furthermore, the big mistake the ANC had made was to be very hasty in chucking out Julius Malema from the party. And while that cannot be reversed now, the ANC had better reach out to the EFF in a kind of toenadering as soon as possible. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
No,
firstly on the DC process and then on any collaboration with the EFF going forward now that they exist.
Well, we have accepted the existence of the EFF. We're not going to dwell into that. Julius will not say, I form a party and betray the people who follow me. So he will want to continue on the trajectory of building his party. We must get our people out in Gauteng to go and vote. The biggest flop we had in this province is that our people did not come out.
But is Panyaza right that the ANC was hasty in chucking him out? Even if there were procedural reasons. But I mean, politics is politics. Was it a political mistake?
First and foremost, some of us, again, I will go back to the Jessie Duarte trajectory. Who do I represent? I represent the ANC. I was involved in the ANC with that case. And ultimately, the ANC took a decision to dismiss them. And that was a collective decision. It doesn't matter my understanding of that case, that it was too hasty or not too hasty. There is a decision of the leadership of the ANC to embrace the DC processes and take it. That's the decision.
So you don't share Panyaza's regret?
No, Panyaza's regret, he must share it in his bedroom, not in the streets. He must abide with the party line. That is what is important. How I feel in my bedroom about being reshuffled is not an issue for South Africans. It's my personal view. And when I state it, I must state it as a personal view, because that's what confused the public about our messaging. Because you come here, you represent yourself and your wife and your kids here, you speak like you are ANC. No. When you represent the movement, stay with the movement. Even if the decision that was taken you didn't like, the decision was the decision of the ANC. To dismiss Holomisa, it was a decision of the ANC. To dismiss Malema, it was a decision of the ANC. Where I stood when that decision was taken is immaterial. We move on, and that is it. And we lost this election year in account of many other things.
Okay.
And it is our task to go back and build and win the confidence of the people in the Gauteng and do exactly what Panyaza does. Good work. Good representative, a person to be Tumat and respond to Tumamina like him. That's what we need from him.
Thank you so much for coming in and engaging so closely.
Thank you very much.